Cool Hand Podcast, something you got to deal with. Welcome back to the show. I am your host. My name is Q. We got a co-host in the building. Co-host, what's your name?
Are you talking to me?
I'm talking to you.
Okay. It depends on where this is being shown for legal purposes, but my name is Dan, and happy to be on the show.
Happy to have you, my bro. I had your brother on.
I know. How'd you give him the first billing?
But you know what? You got the.
I'm Michael Jackson. He's Tito.
You're the older. You're the eldest, right? Okay, but you got the nicer platform. You got the Zoom interview, and your brother
indeed.
got the Instagram Live. Now, if I would have thought about Zoom a long time ago, everybody could have been on Zoom. But so
well, they're not special.
Yeah. You know what? Brandon, you're special too. You're special.
Very.
Oh man, I'll stay out of that one. But welcome to the show. Welcome to the show, Dan.
Glad to be here.
It's nice to have you. We're gonna get to know you some, but we're gonna talk about music because this is a music podcast and all that stuff. But first of all, how have you been? How are you doing with the whole COVID-19 and this and that?
Well, I've been catching up on some badly needed sleep. I was one of the first people who got laid off, but somehow, some way, still surviving. Well, I mean, you know how.
Yeah.
And most of our viewers and listeners know how we're surviving. But yeah, we're surviving.
Yeah. Well, I didn't know. I wasn't aware that you got laid off. Sorry to hear, but I'm glad that you're still up. You're still up and kicking. So.
Well, I do miss the free food. There's nothing like working at a place where they feed you.
Where were you working? Because I remember you used to work at a museum, correct?
Yes.
But I remember you left, but I don't know where you left to.
So I was working at the City Center Marriott right across the street from the PPG Paints Arena. I was actually working in the Starbucks there. That was the only time I ever went into a job interview with the absolute expectation that I was not getting the job.
Yeah.
And I got hired that same day. Didn't even know it. And I mean, I told them, I don't know anything about Starbucks. I've never been to a Starbucks. Literally everything that should have worked against me for that actually ended up working out.
Wow.
I thought they wanted me to come back the next day for an interview. I got there, they handed me an apron and said, they want you to start training. So
that's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you were a barista there.
I prefer the term coffee maker.
Coffee.
There's no way of making that term, sound masculine.
With all due respect, you were a coffee maker.
There we go.
Interesting. Let me just ask you about that real quick because that seems like a difficult job. I don't go into Starbucks like that. I'm not
Me neither.
big on. Yeah, like if I want a coffee, I can just get a decent coffee at Panera, and I just usually drink it black. So I don't need anything special. I think Starbucks black coffee isn't all that great.
African American.
The black coffee isn't all that great, but how how was it working there? Because I always thought it would be difficult.
Believe it or not, and so did I, but believe it or not, it was actually really easy. Once you get the basics down, you can do anything. I mean, I was creating stuff left and right. Mm-hmm. In fact, among the Pittsburgh Police Department, particularly in the Zone 2, what do you call that station? The most popular drink was my Bananas Foster frat.
That sounds amazing, first of all.
It was. I mean, I was just creating stuff left and right, and they let you create stuff, and then, if somebody likes it, they'll come in and want more of that. We found out a way, accidentally, in fact, how to make mousse.
Mousse.
Yes. So I don't know if you've ever seen the cold foam stuff that they use.
I'm gonna say no.
Okay. If you had asked me this, a year ago, I would have said the same thing. But uh, but what it is blended up milk or any type of milk. You can blend it up and it gets into a thick foam, and you can put in different syrups and different things for the flavoring. So one of my coworkers was trying to make a mocha cold foam, and so she put the mocha sauce in it and whipped it up. I tasted it. I said, "Oh my goodness, Chloe, you just accidentally discovered how to make chocolate mousse." Mm-hmm. And so I made some myself, brought it home to my parents, let them taste it. And my mom was like, "Where did you get chocolate mousse from?" Like, it works. Because my mom's a chef, so she would know. Ah. And then from there, I went back and kept tweaking and whatnot. When the pumpkin spice stuff came in, I ended up making a pumpkin pie mousse. I put graham cracker crumbles on the bottom, then the mousse, then whipped cream on top. And this one lady who was one of our regular customers, when she came in this one time, I made it for her, let her try it, and she just, her eyes nearly popped out of her head. She was like, "Oh my God, this is amazing!" And there's just tons of stuff that we would try. Some people, actually most people who would come in from day to day were regular customers, so they already knew what they wanted. And then sometimes they would change things up, and we would test our new creations with them. Like nobody ever was brave enough to try my favorite drink, the Uncle Deadly.
What consisted of an Uncle Deadly?
The Uncle Deadly had the cold brew coffee, which by itself, first time around, tastes great. Don't be on a road trip with it though. But it has that, and then 8 to 12 shots of espresso, and some I would put in heavy cream myself, but you could put in any sort of milk you want. And then the different flavorings, I would usually use a lot of vanilla, depending on what was available at the time. I would put in different things like that. That chestnut praline wasn't bad. And what was the other one that they had during the winter? During the winter, they had some really, really good ones. I'm looking forward to that. In fact, it's looking like the next time we'll get back there might be the winter again. So who knows? Eggnog might be back. Oh, when I had the eggnog, I was in all my glory. Eggnog is a beautiful thing and should be available 24/7. I'm calling upon whoever can make it a law. Make that a law. We need the nog.
Yeah, I can agree with that. Eggnog is something that I wouldn't mind eggnog year round.
Yes.
So you enjoyed working at Starbucks?
Oh yeah. In fact, through that I got to work in different parts of the hotel as well. I know everybody in there, from the general manager, and they would always bring the new hirees around to meet everybody. So, everybody from the general manager down to the newest person there, you'd meet. We would always work alongside the employees in the kitchen. So like the chefs and the other cooks, we got to know all of them, the front desk people. In fact, I got to work at the bell stand. I think they got rid of the term bellhop for some political correctness reasons, probably. But yeah, I got to do that. I got to do a variety of different things there, so it was really nice. Even got to meet a lot of the coaches and players and former players of the Pittsburgh Penguins.
Okay, that's what's up.
Yeah, who would? If you had told me even a month before I got that job that I would end up knowing a bunch of people from the Pittsburgh Penguins or from any hockey team and end up sitting at a hockey game, I would have said you were crazy. But it was really nice. Hopefully, things will calm down. I'll be able to get back to it soon.
Yeah, we're wishing you the best. We're including my wife and I. When I say we're, so when I'm just gonna ask you this too. Even when it comes to music, you mentioned you would create these new, exciting, tasty, very caffeinated drinks.
Very.
I'm gonna add when you talked about that Uncle Deadly. So you're a creator. Do you create anything else? I see you draw. I see you draw on Instagram and things like that. What else do you? What do you do creatively?
Well, as you can tell by my drawings, architecture has always been a passion. So not only do I draw buildings and bridges and other things, but I've also built them as well. So, I've built, one building that I'm working on is a combination of a skyscraper, an early skyscraper in Chicago called the Tribune Tower, with significant differences. But it's a combination of that, but with the frontage of this movie theater in Los Angeles. So it's a mixture of different styles because I designed it to be the headquarters of a film company. So the movie theater in LA, which in fact I can't even think of the name. I think it is called the Los Angeles Theater, but it's in a more Baroque or Rococo style for its front entrance, because back in those days, in fact, it was built at around the same time as the Chicago Tribune Tower, but back in those days, movie theaters weren't the mass-produced, big box movie theaters that they are today. They were, like the Stanley Theater in New Jersey, or even the one here, or the what's now the Heinz Hall. They were built in big, beautiful, outrageous styles back in those days to make them the centerpiece of whatever area they were in. So primarily, in fact, at the time they were called movie palaces because many of them were designed in the same way as palaces. So, for instance, if you've ever been to Times Square, you might have noticed where the Rock and Roll or the Hard Rock Cafe is at. Well, that used to be the Paramount Theater, which was, the toast of the town back in the day, 80, 70 years ago. And it was built in a similar style architecturally. And the Stanley Theater in Jersey City as well. What's now Heinz Hall, but what was originally the Lowe's Penn Theater here. All of these buildings were made to just overwhelm you from an architectural standpoint. So for many years, it was difficult because I didn't have the exact or anything close to the materials needed to make an accurate model of it. But over time, I realized you can always make something out of nothing. So what I've been using is aluminum foil. If you take it and mold it, you can make anything out of it. And so I've been able to make different architectural, architectural details and ornaments and whatnot that I wouldn't have been able to otherwise because, not having access to the materials needed, even to make a model of it. But, stuff like that. Bridges have always been a huge part of what I like architecturally, especially the older bridges and older buildings in general too, back when they had actual character, not what you see today where glass box on a funky angle, tilted glass box, twisted glass box. No. And these telephone pole looking bridges. No, I'm not a fan of that. I like the old architecture, like the Manhattan Bridge. And, well, you can pretty much guess where that's at. But, that's just, to me, that's the most perfect bridge of all. Setting, the architectural detailing of it. And, of course, that was the second of the two bridges that Bethel was in between. So, that's always one of the most iconic shots basically in the world. Everybody knows that location in between the Brooklyn Bridge and the Manhattan Bridge, looking to Lower Manhattan. And, obviously for us, that site has significant nostalgia and significant meaning for us, but also for everybody, even who, aren't familiar with the activities that used to go on there. Just that view, everybody knows it. So, everything about the Manhattan Bridge is just perfect. The Pont Alexandre III in Paris, which is an arch bridge in Paris named after Tsar Alexander III of Russia. Also, an amazing bridge. It was daring for its time because it was so narrow and low. Well, not narrow, but the arch itself was very thin. And so they had to do a variety of different things. It was actually built for the World Exposition in, I believe it was 1889 or 1890. Could be 1894. No, it wasn't 94, but it was sometime in that time. And it was built at the same time as the Eiffel Tower, which was also built for that World's Exposition. And for the bridge, everybody loved the bridge, but the Eiffel Tower, they were like, we'll tear it down afterwards. And then, of course, it became the greatest symbol of Paris. But, I've always tried to emulate the different, historical architecture of old, but try and make it modern too. Some things you just need to take out, other things you need to put in. So in real life, is there a 6-lane highway going across Central Park? No. Should there be? Well, you would also need those two bridges that I drew it connected to. Is there a baseball/football stadium in Upper Manhattan that's based on the Coliseum? No. Should there be? Yes.
Is bright ideas.
That's always, I always say this, always aim for the impossible. That way the unbelievable will be in reach at the very least.
Aim for the impossible because the unbelievable will be. Finish it for me. I almost had it.
Well, I just made that up on the fly. So
I thought this was like something you lived by. Okay.
I mean, yeah, I guess so. It sounded good.
Yeah, it sounded really well. Like, okay. Aim for the impossible because the unbelievable will be
the next rung down.
Yeah, something like that. Okay.
Yeah.
I like that. I like that. That's why I tried to memorize it. Okay. Yeah, I did not know this about you. I didn't know, like I saw you draw, but I didn't know your appreciation for architecture to that degree, and I am one very ignorant human being. I know a lot about a little bit. So
well, that's okay, because as long as you know a little bit about everything, you'll never be totally ignorant about anything.
Man, you just boosted my self-confidence and esteem. Thank you.
See, and if you have any listeners that work for fortune cookie companies, I'm giving them a lot of free material.
Shout out to the fortune cookie workers. We appreciate. Well, somebody appreciates you.
Yeah,
just not me. But
yeah. I don't even need fortune cookies.
Yeah, I was about to say, like, yeah, I had to rethink what I was saying. But all right, so let's get into some music. Let's get into some music. Let's talk some music. So now I spoke to your brother about what you guys grew up on, but let me get it from your point of view. What was the music that you were exposed to coming up as a youngin?
Well, for me, really from both me and Brandon, when we were growing up, obviously our parents were born in the 50s, so we were exposed to much of what they grew up on. So Motown and the other R&B, like the Philly sound, and then of course the 80s stuff, which back when we were little in the early 90s, that was still relatively new. You kids these days don't know about that. So, Michael Jackson still had somewhat of a nose. Most of the Temptations were still alive. We still had 3 Beatles. All of the icons were basically still around, but obviously that is no longer the case. But yeah, so we were exposed to a lot of stuff like the Isley Brothers, the Temptations, the OJs, the Spinners, Marvin Gaye, Smokey Robinson was my mom's favorite. My mom loved Smokey.
Okay.
In fact, I always tell people, oh, you have no idea how much my mom loves Smokey Robinson. In fact, just test it. Go near her and say something negative about Smokey Robinson. And even though we always tell her that we mess with her about that, as soon as somebody says, oh, yeah, I don't really like Smokey Robinson, she goes in for the kill. Oh, no, you didn't? She's ready for it. She's ready for it every time. But yeah, so, of course, another icon from those days, especially, in the early 90s, he was still in his heyday. And of course, us growing up in the New York area, Luther Vandross, huge. I mean, and that was when he was in his fat phase, first time. So he was huge, literally and figuratively. Hey,
My grandmother loved Luther.
Fat Luther. You can touch Fat Luther.
There was an episode of Martin where, like, I don't know what season this was, but he's like Luther went to the Pop-Tart charts. Like, I guess that's when he started falling off to people. But yeah, I don't know, but I remember my grandmother loved Luther.
Yeah. And then of course Stevie Wonder, who now that we're losing all the legends, every time Stevie Wonder's in the news, your heart kind of stops. Like, we can't let anything happen to Stevie.
A Stevie Wonder death would probably affect me. Like, I like to say a lot of celebrity deaths don't really affect me. Death is sad in general, but when Michael Jackson died, it was like, whoa, this is crazy. But when Bernie Mac died, I was like, man, that kind of hurt. So, and
then Isaac Hayes the very next day.
Oh my good! And then they had just did a movie together. Like,
yes.
The movie, I don't know if it came out yet or it just came out. That was a crazy time period.
Yeah.
But I think Stevie Wonder death might I might drop a couple tears. But go ahead. I just had to.
Speaking of which, most underrated Stevie Wonder song, "Joy Inside My Tears," off of Songs in the Key of Life.
Ooh, I don't know that song.
See, I didn't know that song up until like 2 years ago, maybe even a year ago. He tore that up.
Let me because I
he
definitely
tore
have,
that up.
I definitely have that album in my
Yeah, everybody's got the album on their Spotify or something.
yeah,
Everybody.
but we haven't heard that song, or I
Yeah.
haven't heard that song.
I mean,
Okay.
the stuff that he put on that album that they don't play on the radio is possibly superior to what they do play on the radio from that album, which obviously, you know, everything that he put on that album is iconic. The one thing I've always wondered, why do people always go on these talent shows and singing competitions and whatnot? And the one Stevie Wonder song they always try to sing is Isn't She Lovely? The most bubblegum classic era Stevie Wonder song of all time. That's the one they always go with. I'm like, come on. Or they try to do Superstition or Science You'll Deliver. And I'm like, no, you can't do that. You just cannot. That's like trying to sing a Temptation song or a Whitney Houston song. You can't do it. Speaking of which, another person who, of course, was in their heyday back when I was little, Whitney Houston. Or if you're going by the Bruh Man t-shirt, Whitney Hutton. Bruh Man can't spell, Gina.
Oh my goodness.
But yeah, I mean, and this was in the pre-crack days. You know, this is in the Bodyguard days when she was, people just don't even understand who weren't alive to experience it. You know, she was huge. She was everywhere. She was, you know, on TV, on every magazine, on every commercial. She was huge.
I was too young. I'm 26, but coming up, it's not like, you know, I was in kindergarten in 1999, so it's not like I'm paying attention to, you know, TV and stuff like that. So I missed when Whitney was at her biggest because I was just too young.
Yeah, she was something else. And then of course the crackation took over, so you know everything went south. But yeah, so along with that, with listening to what basically my parents grew up on, of course, at the same time, that was when it was still in the early stages of hip hop. You know, that was before gangster rap became the big thing. So, you know, you still had some of the old school stuff, especially the earlier, more 80s and early 90s era New York hip hop that, you know, was what the genre originally started out as being. You know, back when they were talking about stuff that actually made sense. Or when they weren't talking about something that made sense, it was at least funny. And it wasn't, you know, all these vulgarities and obscenities and whatnot. And in particular, my older brother was really into that at the time. In fact, now he even is a rapper and producer, has been for most of my life, actually. Certainly most, if not all, of Brandon's life. He operates under the name Last American B-Boy. And
Last American B-Boy.
Yeah. And he's 16 years older than me.
Okay.
So obviously, you know, he was around when hip hop and rap first started. And so, you know, he would always be listening to the newest stuff with that. And then, of course, you know, shortly after that, you know, things for the genre went to the West Coast. And then we know what happened with that. It became, you know, it got on a path where there's a lot of stuff that wouldn't normally listen to and still don't, with the, there's a way of saying things, saying what you mean, saying exactly how you feel, but without needing to use the foul language and everything. And so, needless to say, growing up as a witness, we weren't listening to the stuff that was foul and vulgar, no matter who was making it.
Mm-hmm.
But for the things that, weren't in that category, there were a lot of different artists that we would listen to. In fact, I would say out of all the, out of early rap, basically take anything from the NBA Streets Volume 2 soundtrack. Big.
That's a classic. Oh, yes, man, I wish I had that. I had that on GameCube. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah. Stretch Monroe was the truth.
We had a conversation about that.
Yep. You can have Bonafide. I was so disappointed. Stretch was the man.
He was.
But in fact, his jersey should be hanging out for the Raptors in Madison Square Garden right now.
He's a street legend.
Indeed. But yeah, and then of course at that time that was in the towards the tail end of the New Jack Swing era, and then that went into the really kind of just morphed because the same people who were at the forefront of the New Jack Swing era, like Babyface and Teddy Riley and them, they immediately transitioned into what became at that time contemporary R&B. So you had a lot of people like Tony Braxton came out in the early 90s, Blackstreet, R. Kelly, before everything came out, even though we knew since 1994 he married Aaliyah, so that was that was public knowledge then.
And then Aaliyah, it's funny because like all these things come out about R. Kelly, all of these, horrible things. It's funny. It's not funny, but Aaliyah, I don't know if it was her debut album, but the album was called Age Ain't Nothing But a Number.
Yeah.
And it has R. Kelly, like R. Kelly's in the background, back with the bald head, like his head's kind of peeking out. It's kind of weird and ironic with all of the things that are going on today, but never mind that. I just wanted to, that's a side note.
Yeah. Things were wild back with that. I mean, how, but that's Holly weird for you.
Yeah, there you go.
So, it ain't much you can do with that, needless to say. That's why one of the many reasons, along with no marketable talent, that I would ever go into the Holly weird life.
Yeah, it's funny. Like you hear a certain celebrity say, they would have took the money, but not the fame. All the things that come with the money. It's like, I talked about that with Evan before, that like, it's not anything. It's that whole crazy lifestyle is not worth it. But,
no, yeah. I've known people who were in that, and some of them are just plain crazy. Others of them will tell you, yeah, I got out of that because it was crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so you go further along. Actually, you know what? Staying in the mid-90s, a group that should have been much bigger than they ended up being, Brownstone, made that song, If You Love Me. And then they made that other one, Grapevine. They should have been much bigger than they...
Can you sing it? Because they're not.
No.
All right, I'll just have to look it up on my own.
You will have to look that up. You will have to look that down. Yes. Because I don't think anyone will leave this podcast happy if I have to sing it. You won't, I won't.
You never know.
Oh, I know. Right, it'll be parodied. I'll definitely be, on YouTube, but not for any good reasons.
Okay. I
My
respect
fans cannot have that.
that. Okay. It's bad PR.
Yes, very bad. Very, very bad. Fortunately, they've never leaked anything of my embarrassing moments, but I like to keep it that way.
Okay.
Never have anything embarrassing recorded
Oh man.
unless it's of someone else.
Yeah. There we go.
But yeah, so there was a lot of stuff that I was exposed to, not only just R&B and hip hop, both old school and contemporary, but also jazz, also rock, even old pop music like Sinatra, Tony Bennett, and Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr., Ella Fitzgerald, all those old people. Some of whom, actually, in Tony Bennett's case, he's still around. But also, treasure, along with Luther Vandross, one of the two greatest singers New York City ever produced.
Talk to him.
See, people need to know. Need to know. But yeah, so you had them, in the rock and blues rock fields. You had Eric Clapton, musical genius throughout his career. Even in the down periods, he was still putting out stuff that was just off the chain. You had, obviously, everybody knows the Beatles and Led Zeppelin, but what a lot of people don't know is that for all of those old British rock groups, like the Beatles, Cream, Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, early Fleetwood Mac, all of them, and the Rolling Stones, their primary influences were what was at the time known here in America as black music. So the old blues guys, the old R&B groups, they were much bigger and had much more mainstream exposure in England than they did here. Obviously, back in the 50s and 60s, we know, why that was due to, racial segregation. So when they would make a hit song, say, if the Isley Brothers make a hit song here, they would have the mainstream record companies would have, Bob Wonderbread make it, and it would be, safe for the national audience, for the TV audience, for the regular radio audience. Whereas over in England, they would get the full thing. So, that's why songs like Shout, the Beatles redid it, and it became just as big of a hit for them over in England as it did for the Isley Brothers. But also, here in America, it was played, thereby getting money in the Isley Brothers' pockets. The Rolling Stones got their name from a Muddy Waters song. They helped get guys like Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf and all of them, all of those old blues guys were able to get exposure and work and money from both by playing in England, and then back when they would come back to America and say the Rolling Stones or the Beatles or Cream would be in town, thinking, hey, you guys should listen to the original version of, like Twist and Shout or, any particular song, like Hound Dog. Of course, everybody knows Elvis' version of Hound Dog. Mm-hmm. Who made the original? Big Mama Thornton. But guess who still gave Big Mama the credit? Elvis. So, fortunately, people are able to hear the originals and mainly because of the fact that those who successfully covered them were good enough to give them the props. And so you can hear that influence in a lot of their music. Now, of course, we know that, and I didn't know this until the movie came out, that Mick Jagger modeled himself vocally and dancingly on James Brown. And I'm like, well, nah, that I don't know what you call what Mick Jagger does with those dance moves, but that ain't no James Brown. But in the words of the Godfather, but let the reader use discernment. But yeah, and of course, listen to a ton of James Brown. Everybody loves the Godfather. Both the original era, the I Feel Good era, back when he was still with the Famous Flames, and then when he was with JB's, back when Bootsy Collins and his brother were playing with him. That's the the Big Payback era, the Soul Power era, and then you had Mustache James.
Mustache James.
When the Perm was in Omega Effect. He had even underrated ones like It's Too Funky in Here. Of course, that was during the Get Up Off of That Thing era. So, you had just the whole body of work even by that point. Then, of course, in the 80s, you had Living in America. In Pittsburgh, PA gets a shout out, even though it bug EA. In James E's. But yeah, then even in the 90s, yeah, Static. Don't start none, won't get none. Words to live by. But yeah, and so there were just so many different musical influences that we would listen to and be exposed to. So, I would feel right at home talking about music with somebody who's 80 years old and somebody who's my age.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're really well-rounded. That's the one thing that I've taken from this. You're really well-rounded, even when it comes down to informative things. Like you seem very versed in, from old music up to now. Like it's actually really impressive, the things that you can kind of retain when it comes to the music thing.
Thank you. I try to listen to anything that's good. Like even the old Disney songs, like from the Aristocats. Even though, now they won't really play the old Disney movies on TV, regular TV,
Those movies were racist.
That's why.
Because I saw like a YouTube video, on like, some of the origins of the songs. I'm like, oh my goodness.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. They were not for today's climate.
Absolutely not.
But if you've ever seen the Aristocats, one of the best, maybe the best Disney song, Everybody Wants to Be a Cat. Now, because of the Siamese cat alone, they will not play that on television today. Okay. However, Everybody Wants to Be a Cat, they tore that up. I mean, that was a great song.
Writing it down.
Yes. Of course, all the songs from the original Jungle Book, the Cruella de Vil song from 101 Dalmatians. They didn't mess around. They had some great ones. And then you had, of course, classic film scores, and you had all the James Bond movies, especially Goldfinger and the iconic theme song from that. Even the very next one had an iconic one by Tom Jones, Thunderball. Then you had, for the most part, the James Bond theme songs were pretty good. Some of them were unbelievably ridiculous and corny. You had stuff like they would stick to the titles. So, what's a moonraker? Or how do you make a song about a man with a golden gun? Mm-hmm. Fortunately for Roger Moore's second to last Bond outing, they did not use the title of the movie in the song. I'll let you look that one up. but for the most part, they had some really good songs. And in the case of some like Goldfinger, they were iconic. So you had that, of course, you had Star Wars soundtrack. Everybody knows the Imperial March and the Star Wars theme song and all of the music from Star Wars. Everybody knows the Superman theme song, the Batman theme song. Everybody knows the 90s X-Men cartoon theme song. All of these different things that just became iconic. And, it was basically music was going steady for a while. Then 2010 happened. Once Kanye went to auto-tune, that was it. Because then the bottom just fell right out. Of course, that was when
Kanye West is a legend.
Early Kanye is a legend.
He fell off around 2015. He started doing a downward spiral.
I would venture to think it was a downward spiral from basically all of last decade. It was a slight downward spiral, but then it became just a disaster.
Man. Kanye West's music means a lot to me, so you're kind of hurting my heart when you speak this decade talk. 808s and Heartbreaks was the auto-tune stuff. That album was amazing to me.
And then right after that.
And then after that, he had My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy.
What does that tell you?
That's one of his most highest held in regard albums. That's like had a lot of critical acclaim.
Well, remember at that time they were still giving Drake critical acclaim. They were still giving Justin Bieber critical acclaim. They were giving One Direction critical acclaim. I don't know who among the three I just named were worse. Shoot, they even gave Kesha critical acclaim. This is right in the early 2010s. It was just a situation where you were sitting back and looking like, this isn't actually happening, right? Like 10 years ago, we had, Outkast, the Fugees, the Roots, Jill Scott, India.Arie, early John Legend, early Alicia Keys.
Early John Legend, I like that.
Then, what happened? Where did it all go? Now we've got, and you had, of course, early Kanye. And I mentioned again, you had Outkast. You had the edited versions of a lot of the songs that we then heard the unedited version. Like, ooh, yeah, that's not good to listen to. But
shout out to Walmart.
Yeah.
They sold all the edited CDs.
See, and that's what they need to do today. It's like they need to show movies that are acceptable for anybody to watch. But, that's a whole nother stretch of road. But yeah. So it went from these classics even semi-classics to tragics. Of course, that was when even the so-called rock groups and acts of the early 2000s fell off the map. 15 years ago, maybe not 15, but certainly like 13 years ago, would anybody feel bad and say, "Oh yeah, I heard the new Maroon 5 song. That wasn't bad. Yeah, I like that." Now, no. Nobody from who grew up in the last decade would even believe, wait, it was actually okay to listen to Maroon 5? They're the corniest thing on the planet. Coldplay, they fell off once Chris Martin, like Gwyneth Paltrow, tried and sing. That was it. That was it. She's the Yoko of Coldplay. It was bad. As great as the Gorillas are, since since Plastic Beach, maybe they haven't made the best stuff. In 2010 was their apex. An album, Stylo, and so many other hits. I think that was also the one with Up on Melancholy Hill and all sorts of different ones. They had their heyday. I can't even think of who in the last decade. No, you know what? In the last decade, I'd say the most talented, mainstream groups. Both of them had their biggest albums in 2011. I'd say first you had Adele with 21, which is probably the most iconic album of the last decade. Then you had out of nowhere, you had Force of the People with Torches. They had all sorts of crazy stuff that was actually really good when they put it together. It was a great album. In fact, I would say that's one of the only albums that I like every song.
Oh,
so
that's quite a statement.
Yes, the only other albums I can say that about would be Isley Brothers, Go For Your Guns, which that's my top of all time. In fact, just about anything they made in the 3+3 era. So, Go For Your Guns, number one. You had 3+3, The Heat Is On, Live It Up, Harvest for the World. They had just an amazing run in the mid 70s to mid 80s. Their run was unimaginable. In I believe it was 95, the album came out. For Lovers Only by The Temptations. That is one of the great albums of all time. Now, mind you, this is by the time when most of the iconic Temptations from the 60s and 70s had just died, or if nothing else, were no longer with the group. And still, they fired off what could be their best overall album. I mean, they just tore it up. Then you have, let's see, Pink Floyd's Wish You Were Here album. Amazing from start to finish. It shows you just how great you can make something when you're completely crazy. And that's basically what the entire album's about, being crazy. But, it's amazing. Then you have albums, another album where every song is great. Anita Baker's album, Rapture, which, again, iconic. You have so many albums from back in the day that were made at a level that today's music doesn't attempt to get to. Mm-hmm. That's the biggest problem, that today you can just pump out any sort of cookie cutter junk on your computer, and then you know, it's a hit and everybody's acting like it's great. But whereas back in the day, if you couldn't sing, it didn't matter what you looked like, you were out the door.
It's a fact.
Or if you couldn't sing, but you could play guitar, Jimi Hendrix, okay, you're in the door and you became iconic. Whereas now, you know, you've got giving Grammys to Justin Bieber and Drake.
Be
Come
up
on.
against Justin Bieber and Drake.
They're garbage. They're horrible. And along with Nickelback and Celine Dion, we need to give them back to Canada.
Oh, wow. These are some bold statements.
Listen, Canada used to give us great musicians. They gave us 4/5 of the band who, you know, made hits like Up on Cripple Creek, Ophelia, and of course, The Wait. Listen to The Last Waltz. It's amazing. They also did what could have been the best rendition of Georgia on My Mind. They had a dude who was basically a white Ray Charles, keyboard player, Richard Manuel. And if you listen to it without watching it, like, oh, I didn't know. I never heard Ray Charles do Georgia on My Mind this way. And then you look up and it's this scraggly, busted, homeless looking white guy. Mm-hmm. And you're like, wait, what? What's going on? And then he listened, like, this dude's great. And just the whole band, you know, just amazing. So Canada gave us the band, minus Levon Helm, who was from Turkey Scratch, Arkansas. But the other 4 guys from Canada, don't you know? Canada gave us Gordon Lightfoot, BTO, Tamia, another 90s icon.
Didn't Tania make I Am So Angry?
Yes, she did.
Okay.
Yes, she did.
Interesting. I did not know she was from Canada.
Yes. And in fact, you probably remember her first big hit, You Put a Move on My Heart. Well, the guy who wrote that and who wrote many iconic songs, and this is another side note, because it just goes to show that music has no color. There's a white guy from England named Rod Temperton. You know what else he wrote? Many of the songs on The Wall. Not The Wall, Thriller. He wrote many of the songs on Off the Wall. That's what I was thinking of. And you know most of the iconic songs by Heatwave, like Always and Forever, Groove Line, and all that. He wrote them. And you know who played most of the music on albums like Thriller and many of the other iconic albums of that era? Toto. The guys from Toto played most of the music on Thriller. And so, you know, you just have all these different icons of music that people should know about, but who don't. See, I was never one of those people who would just listen to something that was on the radio just because, oh, everybody's listening to it. No. You had to come correct. If you didn't, skip. Or back in those days, you know, back in those cars, you turn the dial. Kids don't know nothing about that these days.
Now, let me tell you something. Now, I could appreciate where you're coming from. It's kind of like you go against the grain. And I'll say, you know, I was born in 93. I'll just give you have some years on me. You have a few years on me, right?
Yeah, 3.
3? So 3. Okay. So, but with the 3-year difference, I can admit, you know, a lot more about the older music. I know I was raised, my mom's old school, but we weren't raised waking up on a Saturday morning to some old school to clean. it was just she's cleaning or something like that.
Yeah.
Get up and clean, ain't no music. But so I can call myself a radio baby. When I was coming up, a family friend bought us. Shout out to Miss Dawn. If people know who she is, Miss Dawn bought my brother and I a radio, one each, and she got us a Boys to Men CD.
Oh, now see,
piece.
yeah,
yeah. To the next one, a Boys to Men CD each, and an NSYNC CD. Each.
I thought you said she loved you.
She got us both. So me and my brother both had an NSYNC and a Boys to Men CD. So I knew you were gonna. I'm like, wait. So but we had those CDs and we had the radio, and the radio introduced us to everything. So Eminem was hot.
Yep.
So, and I don't like Eminem now. Like, I don't dislike him, but I don't listen to him now.
Yeah.
He was hot. Okay, 2001 comes around, 50 Cent in the club. So I was raised on like the music that was hot on the radio. And then eventually, like when I was able to get my hands on a computer, I started taking off on what was hot in hip hop, not even R&B. So not even, it wasn't until I was around 18 or 19 where I started to, maybe even 20, I'm 26, I started to branch out. I'm like, all I listen to is rap, literally rap, like barely even any, R&B. So I finally started going into indie, rock, more R&B. And then there's so much, a lot of the people you named, I know some of those staple songs, some of those, landmark songs, so to speak, but not a lot. I'm able to dig into some Anita Baker. I listen to her at work sometimes. I listen to, a little bit of Isaac Hayes at work. I listen to oldies when I'm at work, but there's just so much. And just a 3-year difference between you and I, and even your music history knowledge is very extensive and impressive. So let me just ask you this. What does music mean to you?
Well, I mean, I would certainly say it's a backbone of life, but that's the case with anybody, that, it's a very important aspect of one's day-to-day life. You can always equate certain moments to a certain song. I remember one time when I was around 15 or 16 that we happened to be coming home from, I believe we went to Costco's and the Innemans store, and as we crossed over this one railroad crossing, it was the radio was playing an Earth, Wind and Fire song, and every time that song comes on, I remember, that moment. Not that it is anything even remotely important, but I just remember, hey, 15 years ago, that's what happened. I remember, let's see, what would be another one? I might have been 3, could have been 2, but I certainly wasn't 4 yet. But we were going to Delaware to see my uncle, in fact, my uncle who I'm named after. And For the Love of Money came on the radio. And I still remember that. This is, possibly before you were born, depending on whether it was, early 93 or whether I just hadn't turned 4 yet. But, I remember that. Everybody remembers seeing Good Burger for the first time. George Clinton comes on and they do Not Just Knee Deep. Everybody remembers that. What else? I remember just about every time I can remember moving as a child. Some reason or another, the song Ready or Not by After 7, it happened to come on in the process of that move. I remember it happening the last 3 times. And not because, we played it. This is before that time when you could do that. And this is still when having an iPod was, you were big baller. So of course I didn't have one. But on the radio, bam, happened to come on. And I remember that. You're talking about a 12-year period from 6 to 18, still remembering that. What else? Just there's some songs that when you listen to them, they bring you back to an era. So like with all those 90s R&B songs, like the ones we just named, but for those late 90s ones, you think of, driving to New York to see the family and everything, those family cookouts and whatnot, and, hearing all of these different songs. Then, I think about hanging out with some of my friends who listen primarily to the newer stuff, and some who listen to mainly older rock. Some listen to country western primarily, who, nobody's perfect. But I've just never been able to get into country.
Yeah.
In fact, the one and only country western album I've ever been able to like listen to and be like, this is amazing, is the Ray Charles album, Modern Sounds in Country and Western Music, which, that's going way back. And of course, that's one of his most iconic albums. Shout out to Ray, not only one of the greatest singers of all time and rightfully acclaimed as the greatest male singer of all time, but also got probably the best biopic of all time.
Shout out to Jamie Foxx.
Yes, indeed. He gonna make it do what it do, baby. I'm just gonna tell you that.
When you talked about that album, I thought about the scene from that movie where I think his manager, his boy, his agent, it's like, you want to do this? He's like, this is where I come from, and blah, blah, blah. That was a great movie.
See, you just don't understand. This is the music that I grew up on. This music from where I came from. And I'm gonna do this album. I'm make it do what it do, baby. You just got to believe that. And then, of course, he made it do what it do.
He made it do what it do.
And another song that everybody equates with the original, Yesterday by the Beatles, Ray Charles did the singular version of it. It's one of the greatest singing performances of all time. Whether it's the studio version of him doing it or any of the live versions, he just takes that song and makes it what the lyrics suggest that it should be. Like, it just destroys it. Another song that, now we'll talk about some of the greatest covers of all time. That's one of them. And of course, the band doing Georgia on My Mind, another iconic cover of a song. The greatest cover of a song ever, obviously, was Whitney Houston doing I Will Always Love You. That goes without saying. Everybody knows it. There are only two opinions on that matter. You agree with that, or you're wrong. I mean, she just, it's insane. One that many people don't know about, when David Ruffin did his version of the Harold Melvin Blue Note song, I Miss You. Now, we're talking about somebody taking a song that Teddy Pendergrass sang and just saying, that's mine now. Because he absolutely annihilated it, shredded it, obliterated it. He took that song and owned it. Then you have, of course, the Temptations version of Summer Breeze, which to almost everybody, that is the version of that song. Many people don't even know that it's made by Seals and Crofts.
No.
But, everybody knows the Isley Brothers version of it. Let's see what else. I'd say Albert King's version of The Sky is Falling, originally made by the late, great Elmore James, the blues song. And he did an amazing version of it, particularly this one live version that I found on YouTube. He murdered it. Then, of course, you have, I say then, of course, and then I can't remember it. When John Legend did that album with The Roots, and they did that cover of Donny Hathaway's Little Ghetto Boy, they tore that up. It's another.
I think, didn't they win a Grammy or something for that album? I never heard that album, but I remember. Certain. I think I remember watching the Grammys and they won. I feel like they won a Grammy for that album, and I'm like, I didn't even know they collaborated. I was still a little young in the game.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm almost certain that they did win a Grammy for that album. Then you had, just so many another whole set of covers, the Temptations for Lovers Only album. And, they took songs that were made by some of the greatest artists of all time. They took songs that were made by Dinah Washington, Tony Bennett, Frank Sinatra, Ella Fitzgerald, Nat King Cole, and they covered them and made them their own. In fact, it wasn't for many years that I ever heard the originals of them. And of course, the people who made those originals, icons, some of the greatest voices ever. But, Temptations just, snatch their songs, belongs to us now. Of course, since there's only one of the classic era Temptations still living, that he gets to enjoy that. Though I'm sure he would rather have his boys still with him, still be in that heyday. They were the baddest of the bunch.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. What is it like? You're kind of in the minority when it comes to music, being, especially today. I'll take myself, for example. I'm at the point at 26 that I don't listen to what's super new, I'm more, I branched out around 6 years ago with my music taste. And even now, I would still keep up with what was popping on the hip hop scene. But even today, I'm on the outside looking in. I'll see on my Explore page on Instagram, some rapper who's super famous, and I'm like, I never heard a single song of theirs. And then I have no desire. That's the thing. I never experienced that before of not having a desire to listen to a new hip hop artist. I'm like, don't care. Never heard their music. Don't know if they can rap or not. But I'm just,
most of them can't.
Yeah. I'm like, I don't care. So so I feel like I'm beginning to be a part of the minority when it comes to current music. How does it feel for you being on the outside looking in?
Well, for me,
you know what? I won't call it the outside looking in. That all has to do with perspective. So just being in a minority.
Well, for me, that's how I am for most of my interests, whether it's music, not so much movies, but to a degree, a lot of TV shows, even as we mentioned from the start, my interest in architecture, the books that I read, all sorts of different things. So I'm used to even the stuff that I wear. I've never been into following the latest fashions and whatnot. Look, regular t-shirt, 5 came in a pack of, like $6. Do I care that everybody else wearing, this, that, or the other? No. I lived through the start of the baggy clothes era. I am now experiencing the really tight clothes era. I didn't wear any of them. I've never spent more than $10 on a pair of jeans.
Woo.
Never. In fact, I think the most I ever spent on jeans was $8. I think the most expensive item of clothing that I've ever bought was a $20 baseball jersey.
What about suits?
Now, suits.
Suits. I was about to say, you spent money on suits. Like, I see you in suits.
Now, believe it or not, most of my suits were found by somebody else at Goodwill and the Red, White, and Blue store. And that somebody else is my mom.
Okay.
Yeah, I know she knows what she's doing. So I'm happy to say that when it comes to suits, it's because of her that I know what size I am with the suit. So now I know how to go out and buy a suit on my own, even though the only 2 times that I personally bought a suit and it was, pricey, was for 2 weddings that I was in. Well, actually 3 weddings, because the tux I was able to use for 2 weddings, and then the gray suit I was able to use 1. But combined, that was like $360 for the 2.
Yeah.
But for the most part, my suits. Now the person who originally owned them spent hundreds of dollars on them. I spent $3, $4, $12 getting them from Goodwill, spruce them up at the dry cleaner, and bam, you're wearing a $500 suit and you spent $5 on it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I primarily like darker suits with particularly blue and black. You can't get any better than the classic black suit, solid black, with the white dress shirt, especially when you get to be fancy and put the cufflinks on. And then, nice paisley tie, particularly gold or red paisley. And then, it's the, go with that classic combo. And then what I really like is gaudy watches. Now, I'm sure you've probably noticed this. But yeah, now that's the one thing that I'd love that. I never spend much money on them at all. The most expensive one I ever got was the last one I got. That was $38. But, I'm thankful that what looks great on somebody else that spent, $50,000.
Mm-hmm.
There's somebody right in Chinatown who is making a copy. I kid you not, because that's where I get my stuff from. Thank goodness for eBay. I don't even have to leave my home. Just go right on my phone. Oh, I like that one. Where's it shipping from? Canal Street. And it comes right here. So you'll see, some NBA player or some NFL player or some rapper or whoever else with this big flashy watch, and theirs is really gold and diamonds.
Yeah.
Mine costs a considerable amount less. So, they spend $200,000. I spend $20. But getting back to being, I guess, against the grain in music taste, that's always been something that has really defined me. And it's not anything on purpose. You know, I've never been one of those people like, oh, I'm just gonna be different.
Yeah.
If I like something, I like it, and I'm not afraid to tell anybody that. If I don't like something, I'm definitely not afraid to tell anybody that. You know, so I tell everybody, no, I don't listen to, you know, most of what's new today, like Lil Anybody or any of the other stupid names they come up with, or most of the people who they name on Saturday Night Live as a guest, even though there are several groups that I did discover on Saturday Night Live, Foster the People being one of them. It's like, who are these guys? This song is so wacky, but it's actually catchy. And then so I listened to stuff, I'm like, man, these guys are good. Another you know, offshoot musically that I listened to, that I got into, actually due to the song Uptown Funk. When I got further into that album, I was like, man, this is dope. And one of the primary contributors to that album was a guy from Perth, Australia, named Kevin Parker, who's the frontman of the band Tame Impala.
Saw them live, and yeah, as a side note, they came to Pittsburgh in, I want to say 2015 or 16. That's in Kamasi, Washington are fighting for number one as my favorite concerts.
And I've never even been to a concert, but I can definitely say that they are good. And so I
would have loved it. I wish you could have been there.
Yeah, and I've gotten into their music, and then I started listening to some of the other offshoots of that band. So like Pond, for instance, even though a lot of their newer stuff is a little too wacky, but this one guy who's both in Tame Impala and in Pond, Jay Watson, also makes music under the name Gum, Gum.
No, I did not know that. I knew about Pond, but not Gum.
And I really like the stuff that he makes. Like this one song that he made on Pond's last album before the one that just came out. It's called Colder Than Ice. It was super wacky, but it's actually really good. And so, you know, things like that, you know, just really struck a chord with me from a music standpoint. Another not so well known artist that I've been listening to that never got the recognition that he should have, Steve Marriott. He was
the name, don't know him.
Yeah, he was the founder of the band The Small Faces, which after he left later became The Faces and helped launch the career of Rod Stewart. Okay. Well, he was this little tiny guy. In fact, everybody in the band was tiny. They called themselves The Small Faces for one of the reasons being none of them were taller than 5'6". Mm-hmm. And so he's this little tiny guy. His guitar is bigger than him, and he's just, you know, tearing it up vocally, musically. And in his subsequent career, which ended all too soon due to his death in a house fire at the age of 47. And before that, a lot of, you know, just drug-induced wackiness. You know, he was a guy who really should have been a megastar, like on that Mount Rushmore of artists, but didn't work out that way for him. You know, the fame got to him, and he couldn't handle it. Turned to drugs, turned to alcohol. One interesting story, which is totally unbelievable, but true. When his drug-induced schizophrenia was at its worst, he had this alter ego called, and I'm not making this up, Melvin the Bald-Headed Wrestler. Now, unfortunately, there's no video evidence of this, just eyewitness accounts. But there's no amount of money I would not pay to see some little guy with a terrible mullet talking about he's Melvin the Bald-Headed Wrestler. And they said Melvin the Bald-Headed Wrestler was a very volatile personality, both in speech and in action. And he was English, so, you know, they had all those really wacky, bad things that they say. And it's like, what are they even talking about? Oh, you can't repeat that. Like, damn, like, I ate that out. And, you know, another thing that I recently discovered that may or may not be true, but I'm hoping that it is, a movie project by Quincy Jones in collaboration with Berry Gordy that would star Prince in a samurai movie. Yes. In fact, I think I have the information sitting somewhere here. Let me see if I can find it. It's just huge. But yeah, I can't find it right now. I'll still look for it. But, you know, it's where Prince is on a quest to find something, you know, samurai movies. Of course, it's some sort of quest. And he needs to be trained first. He's not yet ready. I am not yet prepared. I have not cleansed myself and purified myself in the waters of Lake Minnetonka. And then he's trained by a wandering master. Now, this sounds like it's primarily from a music standpoint, but this wandering master is played by none other than William Bootsy Collins. Well, you need to get the funk, man. See, that's the problem. That's why you cannot complete your quest right now. You need the funk. And so, you know, they go off. The villain of the movie, Rick James. Now imagine that.
He did not like Prince. He didn't like Prince in real life, I think, right?
Hated Prince's guts. So imagine how that would went. Aha. You have finally landed in my trap. You will now be destroyed at my pleasure. Ha 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 ha. And then, you know, Michael Jackson was also supposed to be in it.
This is weird.
You know, imagine a fight between Michael Jackson and Prince. And all kind of other foolishness. You will not defeat me. You do not yet have the funk. I will defeat you. And, you know, all sorts of crazy stuff like that.
Yeah.
You know, you had James Brown also in it. Again, yeah. It would have been amazing had they been able to make it. Fortunately, that didn't happen.
Yeah.
Most of those legends are no longer with us. You know, I believe Stevie Wonder was supposed to make the soundtrack as well. I mean, it was just supposed to be whole.
Better and better.
Yeah, I know. And I mean, come on, Stevie Wonder talks like a fortune cookie anyway, so that would have been perfect for him to be some ancient philosopher. You know, the path to success is not through fighting, is through love, and I just believe that if we love, all can be overcome with love. It's like, okay, Steve, thank you. But Yeah, can you imagine what that soundtrack would have sounded like? Unreal.
Yeah.
Absolutely unreal. So, there are just so many things that we never, unfortunately, never got to see or hear. So, you know, there have just been so many different things that were influential back in the day. Now we have access to everything. So
Yeah.
if anybody hasn't heard of most of the people who I've spoken about, and I would venture to guess that most people haven't heard of all of them, I'm probably in the minority of being somebody who has, just as many, let's say, Frank Sinatra songs on their playlist as they do Kanye West, or just as much of the Four Tops as I do of Outkast. Um, you know, I probably have more Eric Clapton songs than I do of rap songs, period. Um, First and foremost, the Isley Brothers. Just, I would venture to guess that on my playlist that I listen to, I probably have no fewer than 100 of their songs. Like just whole complete albums.
You're old school.
Yeah.
You gotta respect it.
You can't beat the best. And, they just had so many that were just iconic. They were the only group ever to chart a song for, I believe it was 6 or 7 consecutive decades. So starting in the 50s with Shout, in the 60s they had ones like This Old Heart of Mine when they were with Motown. Then, of course, in the 70s, they basically were some of the ones who started funk with It's Your Thing. And then from that to the 3+3 era when, they, hit the stratosphere. Then, of course, in the 80s, they had their great 80s period. Then, of course, in the 90s, when they, out of nowhere, collaborated with R. Kelly, made those iconically ridiculous songs then. And then, that continued on into the early 2000s. And even in the 2010s, they still managed to still have hits. And of course, we remember that when they were honored on, I believe it was the Soul Train Awards. I forget what year. It was probably like 2012 or something, 2011, 2012, somewhere around there, when they were honored on the Soul Train Awards, and Tank tanked his career because he didn't know the words to For the Love of You, a song that everybody knows. Everybody.
I don't think I know it.
I'm sure when you listen to it, you know it. You know it.
Get you to sing it, can I?
You definitely cannot. I'm not getting paid for this, remember. But yeah. So he didn't know the words to that, which, in the Black community, that's like a capital offense. He just, the Tank's never been the same after that. Like all his G status is gone. Gone. Like, dude, you can't do that. You absolutely cannot do that. But he did it. Didn't know the words. Shame.
I'm gonna listen to that first after this, just to make sure I don't get my. I feel like my card has already been pulled. After this.
Yeah, don't let any older relatives know that you don't know that song. Like you're gonna get that old school whipping if
pick a switch off a tree. That type
yeah,
of whipping.
yeah. That old Joe Jackson kind of whipping. Maya, go give me a switch.
Listen, we're closing in on almost 2 hours. this has been. I have to wrap it up because I'm gonna tell you the truth. I'm hungry.
I don't blame you.
I'm hungry. I'm hungry. This was I'm not gonna close it out right this moment, but I have some good notes. And this was very informative because I talk to people who for the most part create something and stuff like that, and but when it comes to, in a sense, history, things like when it comes to history and people who wrote for this person or that person or the origins of a certain group, where you talk about how a lot of what was called black music was popular over in Britain. Things like that I did not know at all. You see, like, I'll see things on social media. Maybe it's something like Twitter or Instagram or something like that that says rock and roll music was created by this person. This genre was created by that person.
Yeah.
But I don't really believe anything I see on social media, for one. So
Yeah.
so to hear something, to hear the what and the why, and to hear some names that you don't hear often is really interesting to me. So that's the one thing that I took from this was a lot of history, and I can appreciate that.
Well, I'm glad to be of service. And, even today, there's still some great unsung artists out there. In fact, through Instagram, just following along and just, seeing what's going on. Just randomly stumbled on several artists who, I've listened to, who also appreciate the memes that I post. So shout out to Chris Espinoza, Cole Adams, and Dylan Galvin. They always appreciate the memes and my rather insane rants. Nothing so insane as Melvin the Bald-Headed Wrestler, but that should be a song title, if not an album title. But, you just, there's all the building blocks out there. And so, unfortunately now, from a commercial standpoint, those building blocks don't get used. They are totally discarded in favor of some boob with a laptop and GarageBand. But, there's still some people who are actually picking up a guitar or something and making an iconic song that nobody's heard yet. And just as a brief side note, another thing, going back to the ancient times when you asked me what are some of the things that I like to create. Well, the first time I ever went to Guitar Center, I saw this amazing thing. I had never, been into playing the guitar, so I had never really looked at it. But I saw the Fender Stratocaster, which is one of the most iconic inventions in American history, in modern history, particularly when it comes to music. That's possibly the most iconic guitar of all time. Everybody uses it, from Jimi Hendrix, Eric Clapton, Buddy Guy, even today, John Mayer, they all use Strat. And the ones that I like, well, they were out of my price range. So I got one that was $60 and everything, and I would always go on a computer and make, digital versions of what I would want mine to look like. And then I discovered that with some ingenuity and some cheap bits and pieces, shout out to eBay once more, you could make something that started out at $60 and basic. This is the first one that I made.
Whoa.
So
that sound effects. I wish I had
well, that's only because yeah. So this one started out this color with a different neck. In fact, I have the original neck sitting a couple feet away from me, but I can't reach it. But it had a different neck. It was this blue, and it was just a regular run-of-the-mill used Squire Strat that I got for $60. Well, years later, I decided I'm going to finally bite the bullet and try to modify this into what I want it to look like. So it went from something regular that anybody could buy to the Emperor. So I placed all the hardware, the neck, obviously the strings, pick guard, covered it in a vinyl wrap, which when I realized that the jack plate wasn't gold, that I forgot to replace that. And so rather than try and replace it now and have to take out all this stuff, let me do the next best thing and get gold foil, very fake gold foil, like 1,000 sheets for $2 on eBay. And, I'll just do it myself. I'll just cover it myself. Well, gold foil was very flimsy. And so it would, crack from the slightest touch. It would stick to my fingers. So when I tried to get it off, it would just flake off. And it ended up going a lot further than just the jack plate, as you can see. So it ended up with gold flake, very fake gold flake, over the entire thing. And so that ended up lending itself to a kind of, I guess, spacey look, like a deep space nebula or something. And so this was the first one that I did, and I'm working on several others, which I will continue to post on Instagram, along with a great many memes and any other wacky creation that might have been drawn up in my mind. But, the shortage of money, which is something that everybody is going through, especially now, can never defeat the power of the imagination. So people should never let an inability to have the things that one would consider essential to being able to, get what they want even from a material standpoint. We'll just go with that. And for instance, those flashy watches. Now, one would think, oh, you got to be a millionaire to get that, or at least be in debt to a millionaire. No, go right on eBay. It's $20. If I wanted the real version of a guitar like this, you're looking at, $5,000-$10,000. The original guitar was bought for $60. Everything that I put on it definitely totaled less than $200, probably about $120. And so, I could never afford the real versions of the guitars that I draw and I like. But what I do, found an alternative thanks to the internet. And so, whereas the original Fender parts, you're looking at $300 just in hardware alone. Thanks to eBay and GuitarFetish.com, you're looking at, maybe $300 for the whole thing. A lot of times, much less. I've never spent more than about, I'd say, $200 on any one, and that's over time. Same thing with the buildings that I've built. Obviously I knew I couldn't build the real architectural models of them, both due to a lack of space and a lack of material and lack of time. But what happened? I was able to use aluminum foil. Who would have thought it? Aluminum foil, cardboard boxes, some tape, and anything can happen. So, it just goes to show that a shortage of material, a shortage of the wealth necessary to have the real versions of certain things can just lead to an avenue of, hey, you know what? What can I do as an alternative? I can do that. And by doing that, that enables me to do this, that, or the other, and makes it where now I'm not constrained by having to just do the basic thing that everybody else is doing. I can make it my own and make it better than it was before. And that's something that I've learned, I would say, most of my life. You know, I never had a lot of money, and even if we did, like we were growing up, my parents weren't the kind of parents that would just, you know, anything you want, you get. You know, they taught us to appreciate things. And that's, of course, certainly not to say that we were ever deprived of anything, but like any good parent, they didn't just give us everything. And so, you know, that not only taught the importance of what you did have, but it also taught the importance of knowing what you want. And if it's important, you'll end up there. You'll end up getting it. If it isn't, you know, in a couple of days, you forget about it. And so when I was a kid and I couldn't get, you know, one thing or another, or, you know, whether sometimes they wouldn't even make it at the time. And then this was before everybody was using eBay and Amazon and everybody had a website. So if it wasn't at the store, you didn't get it. And plus, this was also in days when my mom was definitely afraid of, if you put your information on the internet to try and buy something, somebody's gonna steal your identity. In fact, she still thinks that people dumpster dive. I'm like, nah, they don't do that. They steal your identity from the internet. But so she was always against you buying anything on the internet. Took her years to break out of that. But yeah, so I ended up having to make stuff like different buildings and bridges from what I had at home. And that continued through life. And to the point where it is today. In fact, I'm still working on what will be my greatest bridge ever, but I'll keep you updated on that.
Yeah.
And then when I was a kid, you know, growing up in New Jersey in the 90s and early 2000s, baseball was huge. Mets fan or Yankees fan? I was always a Mets fan. Even though they've broken my heart a million times, broken my heart more than Jedi did to Forrest Gump, I'll still never turn against my team. And so I read this book when I was a kid. It's the Eyewitness book about baseball. And the page about the World Series, they showed the New York Giants 1954 World Series, right? That was the World Series when Willie Mays made the catch. And I saw it and I was like, man, I would want one of those. You know, it goes to the heart of my fondness for flashy jewelry. Well, we ended up making a neighborhood baseball league. This was in 2001, so the summer that I turned 11. And I always told all my players, because there were no actual rules to this, it was absolute chaos. I told them, if you play for me and we win, you get a ring. Now, obviously, I did not have any access to gold and diamonds, but clay and that aluminum foil again, it will make things happen. So at that, and also I signed the kids on my team to contracts, long-term contracts for several $1 billion, but I did not tell them that it was in Zimbabwean dollars, which at the time were incredibly devalued to the point where, you know, one US penny was worth, you know, like 800 trillion Zimbabwean dollars. So I hand them a nickel, and they owe me several thousand lifetimes of baseball,
Oh my
which
goodness.
I will pursue in court if I need them. They are coming back. They signed the contract. They took the money. They did not elect to have that contract looked at by an agent or parent or anybody else. So they are mine. Even when
Oh my goodness.
the dust from their bones is ancient, they will still be under contract.
Wow, that was a foul contract. You were 11
Hey.
years old.
Hey, if I took the time to know foreign exchange rates when I was 11 to when I was, 16, they could have done the same thing.
Fair enough.
You can Google it today. In fact, now that I'm almost 30, the days of playing the neighborhood are long gone. Unfortunately, to be a kid again, youth is wasted on the young. But if I was, all the kids I know today who are, mainly my friends' kids, I'm now in that age where I'm like moving out of the adopted older brother range and more into the adopted uncle range. So I do enjoy harassing my friends' kids. I definitely do enjoy that. So I would sign all of them to $1 trillion contracts, hand them a penny, and think, now you have to fill the terms of this contract until you're 950 years old, which so far only Keith Richards has lived to that age in the last 3,000 years. But now unfortunately these kids are smarter now, so they'll Google stuff.
Yeah.
But it was a wonderful era back then. So things have certainly changed. I now find myself turning into one of those people who longs for the good old days for certain things. I do like the ease of shopping at home, particularly now that I have the Walmart app. I was able to order cookies and they were delivered to my doorstep. That was great. So I didn't have that back then. And they brought back Dunkaroos. I still have to try those new Dunkaroos.
Aren't they on Amazon? Or
they could be. I know they're selling them at 7-Eleven, but
okay.
I haven't gone into 7-Eleven yet. So I've been following it on Instagram, looking for when it's going to be at Walmart. I know it ain't going to be at Giant Eagle or any of the local Pittsburgh stores because they don't get anything. But if it is, when I find it, I will get it. I just pray that it still tastes the same. Of course, now we know, that all that junk that we used to eat, especially now, shouldn't be ingested by humans, but, still good. Still good. So, hey, we live and we remember. There's always nostalgia.
Yeah. Well, all right, man. It was nice having you. This was like
nice to be here.
This was like class to me. This was like music 101. And also I learned some stuff that I didn't know about you, like the architecture. I didn't know your drawings that you would put on Instagram went further than being drawings. It was actually going to come to life. Let me put it that way. And the guitar thing was crazy. That was a crazy experience. And I think I'll close out saying this. I think we can all learn from Dan today. Because, and I'm gonna tell you why.
That can't be good.
No, you were talking some real stuff throughout the whole thing, but this was some real stuff. when it comes to just living without, having things that you may not, because I don't have, all the stuff that I bought, I had to save up and catch some breaks financially, and I'm like, okay, I can buy this, I can buy it. But but tweaking things, finding cheaper alternatives, putting a little bit of extra work into things to have what you may not be able to afford. I appreciated that because, I'm always looking, the more I get into this podcasting thing, the more I realize, okay, I may need this to tweak the sound. Like when this comes out, or not when this comes out, when I go to edit this, my microphone will be lower than your microphone. I haven't figured it out all the way, but I had to put some money into an online compressor to help adjust. So like certain things, like, there's always something else, but I really appreciated that. I'm gonna take that and apply it just to kind of finesse the game. But
hey, that's the goal. If we might not have money, but we do have the ability to finesse the game.
That is perfect. Cool Hand Podcast, something you got to deal with.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. I'm going to stop the recording.